how freaking smart the guy is,
Did,
if nothing
did you
else.
watch the Michigan State Big Ten championship game?
Michigan State, the
Yeah,
hockey game.
hockey game.
Yeah, it was a ripoff. Yeah, I can
Yeah, here
talk about.
I think we're live. Are we live?
Are we
We are
live? Yeah.
live on
Oops.
stream,
I'm
and
glad
we are
I
going to be live on
glad
radio in 5, 4, 3.
glad I
Yeah,
wasn't
we
swearing.
are back. Hey, we got to get the war. My man Biz, he put us live. Said, "Oh shoot, we're live." I'm glad I wasn't
Yeah.
swearing. But we are live
Yeah.
on radio too, here on the
Yeah.
Michigan Insider on
What's
Sports
your
Talk.
profanity?
I'll
Here on the
try.
Michigan
I'll do my
Insider
best.
Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. It is MGoBlog Roundtable time. It is a one-man roundtable today, as Seth Fisher's in France. Brian Cook
He's a
is otherwise
conehead.
occupied, and Craig Ross has the floor.
I got the
I
floor.
mean, Craig has been waiting for this opportunity.
Well, I am, because every time I start, Brian can see Brian. The way this works is you can see everyone, and every time I start to go off on one of my things, Brian's eyes start rolling. Sam's head hits the table.
It
Uh,
does.
it's but we got stuff to talk about. We have hockey, which is very
Yeah.
interesting, and we've got Dusty May, who's super interesting, and so we can talk about that. But I do have a really brief story that I wanted to talk about, and it's uh,
Of course.
when my girlfriend dumped me. I don't know how old I was, maybe about 18.
So this
She
wasn't Liz. This wasn't Liz. They dumped
no,
you.
my wife now.
Yeah.
No, Sue. No, Lynette, Sue.
My
No,
bad.
no. That I didn't get married till I was 40. I didn't meet Sue till I
Okay.
was in my late 30s. Um, but uh, no, this girlfriend who we got along with, but she dumped me, and she quoted Oscar Wilde. Now, what's an 18-year-old doing quoting Oscar Wilde? And she said, uh, the best thing that can happen in one's life is not to get one's heart's desire. And so she said, me dumping you is the best thing that ever happened. And she was right. And at 18 I couldn't get it. But at the time, but now, or even a few years later, I sort of understood it, even though we were friends for many, many years thereafter. Well, it's sort of, I wanted to talk about this game as a kid, APBA baseball. I don't, maybe somebody out there knows about APBA baseball, but it used to be a little ad in the back of the comic books in the 50s. And it looked just so cool. It had all these little tiny card and baseball stats, and it just looked cool. And it said, send us a self-addressed stamped envelope and we'll send you a glossy, you know, statement of what this game is all about and a free card, because apparently every player had a card. Well, I couldn't I couldn't afford this. It was like $9. Forget it. That $9, I mean like $2 a week on my paper route, and like another 50 cents a week in the bowling alley. And 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 so there was no way I could afford this $9. But I got this idea. I sent a self-addressed stamped envelope, Craig Ross, and they sent me back this very cool, uh, slick piece of thing and a card. They sent one of the cards that was one of the players. Unfortunately, it was like Arnold Portocarrero or some really bad player from the 50s. But I thought, I could get all these cards if I keep sending in enough of these things to this company, and I'll just use different names. So I used Wolfgang Amadeus Ross, Johann Sebastian Ross. I would send those in figuring I was going to fool them, right? I was a really a really clever thing. Well, they kept sending them to me. I keep getting these things. I keep getting new cards, except they're all terrible players. There's no Mickey Mantle. There's no Willie Mays. It's like Arnold Portocarrero or Johnny and Freddie O'Brien, guys that couldn't play at all. But here was the thing. Not getting this game and not being able to afford this game as a kid was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because what I did was I took these cards and began to reverse engineer them. And so, right, in other words, I've tried to figure out what all these numbers meant. And maybe I didn't exactly figure out, but I had this glossy, or I had numerous glossy explanations of the game, and I had several cards. And so I was able to reverse engineer them, make up my own cards, and come up with uh, uh, own vision of the game. And and so in the end, it was a lot better. Not being able to afford that was a lot better. And I think this relates to everything we deal with in sports. Okay, I'll get it. Let's talk about Dusty May. In any event, but and it also helped me in my professional life too, making up these cards, because it led me eventually into an idea about software, and I created this software idea, which still is a viable business for me. And so here's the thing: not getting what you want, is sometimes the best thing that can happen in your life. And this relates, I guess, to this week to me in a limited way. I really wanted Brian Earl as the head coach. I mean, Cornell was so much more interesting than any team I saw this year. I mean, I'm not. They were just a fascinating team to watch. I mean, I fell in love watching with that team, watching that team. But when I listened this week to the Dusty May podcast and I went to his presser, which was a mind blower, I felt, nah, this makes more sense. This guy is probably the right guy for Michigan. So there you go. Uh,
See,
a long way to get next to nowhere.
this is that you've been held back all this time.
Yeah,
Craig, you needed the floor.
needed the floor.
Craig needed more time. So when I found out the round table would be one man strong,
I didn't know that.
The MGoBlog side of things is if it's Craig, there's no problem. There's no problem. Craig is like three people handling it all. But you might recall, Craig, let's rewind the tape about a month.
I probably said something stupid, but
no, it was. But we were talking about, hey, what's going to happen? Is Ward, is he going to move on from Juwan? And I said, listen, I think he's predisposed to keeping him.
I was too.
And I think he was. I think that much was clear. He said in this little breakout session, which was unscheduled, they said you weren't going to be able to get him in a breakout. He did a breakout, and he said it was the hardest thing he ever had to do. He went in there, and I think I'm confident that what I've laid out is exactly how it went down. Like he was going to have to. It was going to have to be like Jim Harbaugh in that there was going to have to be an honest inventory of the issues and some comprehensive solutions to those issues. And anything short of either of those things you're going to move on. And I think things didn't get past the honest inventory phase. And so he moved on. And I said at the time when I was like, look, I think he's predisposed to keeping him. He's going to give him an opportunity. If he moves on, do you remember the name I said, Craig Ross? Who did I say at the time?
I think you said Dusty May.
I said Dusty May.
I think you did.
Dusty May all the way. He was the guy. It was clear that he had been put on Michigan's radar. He had put on Ward Manuel's radar over a year ago, right? When it looked like Sharon was maybe gonna, not Sharon, looked like Juwan was possibly gonna go to the Lakers, and he turned it down. It's like, hey, his former boss at Eastern Michigan, Charles Ramsey, was like, hey, look at my guy. And this is before he went on the Final Four run. And I want to do full disclosure. I've known Dusty for 20 years now, but I had lost track of him after he had taken the Florida assistant job. Yeah, I didn't even realize he was at FAU until I'm watching the game, and they pan to how they show the coaches. They show the coaches on the side, and it's like, what? And it was like one of those quick ones. And I wasn't looking at the screen. I looked up, and Like that looked familiar. And then they went back and it was Dusty. And it's like, oh man, he's really come up. He's really, really doing well. And he built that program. I think, Miz, didn't you say they had made the tournament like one time before
Yeah,
Dusty?
only one time prior to Dusty.
Yeah, man. And so it was one of those deals where, to me, the combination of youth, of program building, of the ability to connect the players, know a lot about his willingness to engage when it comes to the fans and the donors and the alumni. It just checks so many boxes to me, and clearly checks so many boxes for Michigan here,
Yeah.
Craig.
Well, I'd like to go back to Juwan for a minute. I met Juwan many years ago in Tommy Amaker's office, and he just happened to be in town. I knew Amaker well. I was wander around the gym a lot, and so Amaker said, "Hey, come talk to this guy," and I liked him a lot. And no, I found him very personable, interesting to talk to. Um, I think Juwan, I mean, look at what Juwan did here. 2020, they were number 16 in Ken Palm, good team. 2021, number 3 in Ken Palm, great team. 2022, still number 27 in Ken Palm, pretty decent year. And then in 2023, year before, they fell off the cliff on that 18-16 season. But I went back and looked. They lost 12 games in the last two minutes of the game. I mean, that easily could have been a 22 or 23 win game team without doing anything except having a little bit more luck. I mean, they were
it's a great point. It's a great point, Craig. And that was part of, to me, that was part of it. Now I wasn't in on the meeting to really know exactly what they were talking, but to me, we went over a number of things. Granted, there were definitely some things that were out of his control. Like, he can't control admissions, but you got to be able to adapt to admissions. Dusty talked about that, right? You got to be able to adapt to what the admission standards are, and get the players you want in under those parameters. So, that was probably something. And the discipline and players being academic. You had Doug be academically eligible to all its close games. Like, why did you lose so many close games? So look, I don't want to relitigate the Juwan Howard era, but it speaks to he had an opportunity, and Ward, and sitting down with him, was like, look, I'm just not hearing what I need to hear in order to give you more time. So I got to move on. And so that was on a Friday. By Monday, they had a list, a list that was building, but Dusty was number one on that. And I don't think that was just a 2-day thing. They realized, oh, Dusty's the best guy. Again, they had been vetting him for over a year. And so it gave him some runway, some lead on the runway on the field. And it was a matter of, could he hold on to it? And then after that, could Michigan appeal to him in a way that made Michigan number one on his list? Because you remember, Craig, I mean, even some Michigan folks had him signed, sealed, and delivered to Louisville.
Yeah, I did. Because before I began to listen to him. Yeah, just one thing about Juwan. I think if Juwan, after his heart attack, had said, "Look, I'm out. I'm not physically or emotionally ready for this year," he'd probably be the coach next year. But he made other mistakes, the Kradenhoff thing, the Sanderson thing, whatever went down there. Obviously, that wasn't good. The Doug's not being eligible. And in the end, this last year, it was a terrible, incoherent roster. The worst, I went back, this is the worst basketball season since 1959. People are saying 66, 67. No, I sat through the 66, 67 season, hard as that is to believe. And that team, bad as they were, was better than this team. And so you have to go back to 1959. And the other thing is, and I heard this from media people, and I don't know if it's true, because I was like Jawan, is that a lot of media people, or at least a couple, were complaining to me that he really wasn't sufficiently accessible or sufficiently engaged with with them. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I had at least two media people, not Sam, not but other people who were recognizable, tell me that. And so I think Juwan made some mistakes. Moving on to, you want to say something about
Yeah, I
that?
was just
Or,
gonna say, I
yeah,
I don't really think that matters. I
yeah.
don't think how accessible he is to the media
Mm,
is a factor at all. I
okay,
don't think that's a factor in his job performance.
okay,
Factor in. I don't think that comes up in the evaluation. It might comes up in the perception of the media. But
okay,
I just don't think. I mean, if I'm him, I don't care about that. If I'm Ward, I don't care about that.
okay.
What I do care about is how accessible and how engaging you are with the donor base,
Uh,
because that plays results play into NIL. Because while he can have his complaints about Michigan's NIL support, and those are totally legitimate gripes, that Michigan has had to evolve to the point where they are now, where they are actively, look, we got to protect our football roster, right? I wonder if the posture that they just took with the football program after winning the championship, they took that same posture with Hunter Dickinson. Does Hunter even ever leave? Do they get Ray J. Dennis? Right. But
yeah,
you got to have results, and you got to have, I think, you got to have institutional involvement, which is one of the things you hear, like a lot of the folks in the donor and collector space talk about. And then you have a head coach who gets that. Look, you're not just a passenger in that process. You're a participant. You got to help. You got to solicit. You got to schmooze. You got to go out and help get that NIL support. It's something that we saw Jim get to gradually. It's something that we saw Sharon jump right in, feet first, right away. He gets the job on a Saturday. He has donors in the building on Monday, like, hey, let's go. And it's something that I saw Dusty do at the press conference. He
yep,
gets up, he addresses the media and the people. He goes and meets the Maze Rage.
yep,
I go up and exchange pleasantries. Hey, you're back, kind of thing, right? And as soon as I'm done talking to him, he's right there talking to a donor about, hey, this is what we got to do NIL wise. Like right then, he didn't even wait. It wasn't even a day later. Wasn't even an hour later. It was minutes after the press conference. He's talking
yeah.
NIL with a donor.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, and he knows which direction to go. Uh, Alex Drain, because it's Alex Drain's nature, said to me, "I need to listen to an hour and a half podcast he did with a team building guy a year ago." And then in the last day, I've watched 3 FAU games in addition to that, to try and get some instinct about what he's doing. And some of the he at the press conference, I pulled 10 things out that I thought were super interesting to me. One of the first things he said was that uh, that he wanted the team to be fun to watch. Now that's
Yeah,
something you don't hear
that
very
is true.
often.
That's true.
He wanted the team to be fun to watch, and from watching the tapes, they kind of are. They don't play at a slow pace. They play at a fast pace. They get the ball up the court and they shoot threes because, as he said, threes count more. Uh, and and so that was pretty interesting. Now I have to admit, I felt against the games I've watched, Northwestern, Temple this year, and Kansas State in the final 8 last year, I felt that their half court offense, they had sets and they were interesting sets, but they tended to devolve into ISO against good defenses. But maybe that's the same as everybody else in the world. But I like the idea. It was the very first thing he said is, we are going to be interesting and fun to watch. So he's already speaking to fans and saying, hey, show up, buy
Well,
tickets.
it's funny. It's a great point, and it did strike me at the time,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of coaches say, "Hey, look, my job is to win. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
have
he
to.
didn't. Yeah,
I don't have to win the ratings. I got to
yeah,
win games,
right.
right?" And so, but this was different. This is like Tony Bennett.
Yeah,
is not trying to entertain fans. He's
Right.
just trying
No,
to win. He's just trying
watch,
to win the game, right?
watching Tony Bennett is like going to a funeral. And I mean, those teams are not watchable. And he made it clear right from the beginning. No, we're going to be a watchable team. And he said we're going to play coherently and with teamwork, and we're going to play a fun style. I love that, and I love that as a place to start in a press conference of this sort. It was very unusual. Second thing he said was he was asked, I think Andrew Kahn asked him about where he was going to get players. And I'd heard him say this before, but his preference is high school players.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to build a team up from the bottom, and he wants people in the program for 3 or 4 years. And I don't know if I heard him say this at the press conference or someplace else, but what he said was, in one of these places, was he wants to have lifetime relationships with the kids in this program. He said, I have lifetime relationships with them now, and I want to continue to do that. And for me to do this, I need to get him out of high school, and I need to build the program from the bottom up. And then in the next words, what does he say? He says, but he goes, I understand the reality of today's world, and yeah, I'm going to have to be in the portal. It is, quote, in his exact words, inevitable.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
he's a
go ahead.
relationship guy. He's a
Hmm.
relationship guy. I mean, he got the job, and then I can't remember what. I mean, it was a day. It might have been that night or the next night. I looked at my phone. It was like 11:30 at night, and it was a message from Dusty. It was like, "It's been a long time, Sam. Like, like I'm back," kind of thing. Like it was like,
Yeah,
man, like, but he's that dude. And so for the media who were upset that they didn't talk to Juwan a whole lot, he'll be the poet for whatever that matter. I mean, look, if the media has access and he loses games, it's not like they're gonna it's not like it's gonna change how they talk about him. That's why I say that doesn't really matter. But from the standpoint of how happy the media is to cover him, that will change because he will absolutely be engaging. And the donors, I think, will see. There's no question, and I'm seeing in the chat right now. Yeah, look, the level of support for Michigan basketball is not the same kind of support that there is for Michigan football.
right.
We know that. We should admit that. And the same is true on the donor side of things, but that's why it's so much more important. I mean, as important as it is for Sharon to be engaging, right? He doesn't have to. It doesn't take as much effort to convince people to get behind him monetarily as it's gonna take for Dusty to do it with basketball, but still, it's a tradition-rich program, and he doesn't have to do it he doesn't need as much money. It's not as much support as football is going to need. So 6 and 1, half dozen the other. My point is, he is a guy tailor-made for that piece of it, and I thought that was one of the quotes that really stuck out to me.
Right.
He said, "Hey, I'm going to participate in building NIL, building it further than where it even has gotten to now."
Well, indeed, he was asked this by Tom Crawford, and he said, when he was asked about NIL, and he goes, "Nah, I'm going to spend 25 to 30% of my time on that." So, I mean, again, that's pretty unusual thing to say. I felt like he had just said just previously, look, it's high school players, and then he said, but yeah, it's inevitable. I've got to be in the portal, and we've got to work with the donors and bring them into this program to make it a success. So yeah, very next question he had in between, I guess in between that, he said, because he worked for Bob Knight, and someone asked him about Bob Knight, and he said, well, if I can work for Bob Knight, I can work for anyone. Not really insulting Knight, but at the same time, sort of acknowledging, that particular reality. I thought that was very clever. And he then said on another question that, and this is pure Beeline and pure Bakari, and Laval. Someone asked him about, who he's trying to bring in, and he goes, "Look, I'm going to be patient. I got to bring in the right kids of the program. This program, it's partly the coaches, but it's more the kids. And I got to bring the right kids in here, because if you bring the wrong kids in, nothing else matters.
Right.
And I thought, okay, that's pure Beeline.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you all kind of stories, man. I could give you all kind of stories. When they recruited Trey Burke, I was like, man, y'all sure, y'all sure this is gonna work? You sure John's gonna be able to coach? Because I had watched Trey cuss out Benji. I watched him cuss out his dad at the AAU game.
Okay.
Like, how is this gonna work? But they had obviously known the kid well enough to know that wasn't indicative of who he was or how coachable he was. And that was a very young Trey. I think that was between his freshman and sophomore years at the time. But conversely, I remember talking to him about Josh Jackson. I was at a game or something, and I was talking to him. He says, hey, man, because they always want to know like who's playing well at the game.
Yeah.
And I was like, Josh Jackson. And okay. Now you told me who can play. Now tell me who can play for John Beeline. Gotta say, because that's not that guy. Or like when it came time when Tuggs Bowen's recruitment came around, and I know John Beeline was like, we got to go all in on Tuggs Bowen. And the staff was like, no, coach. Okay, coach. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work, right? So to the point that you're making, Craig, fit is gonna be a big thing. Fit, not just fit for Michigan, but how do they fit with the coach and his demeanor and his temperament and his vision for the program? And so that is going to be an interesting journey with Dusty as he comes in. He's like, we're not just going to take any guy. We're going to take the best guy that actually fits.
Yeah. And then the next thing he said was that was a question about Louisville. And I'll give the media credit. They really sort of covered the ground on all this stuff, and they didn't back away. And I thought this is a place where we would really get a non-answer answer. But no, I knew from listening to his podcast that Louisville just wasn't the right place for him. Vanderbilt, maybe. Louisville, no way in hell. And so what he said was this. Yes, Louisville is a great basketball school, but this is the right match for me. Right? So he doesn't insult Louisville, even though after listening to him for an hour and a half of that podcast, the odds of that guy going to Louisville are the odds of me getting a full-time radio show, right? They're about the same.
I know you got a lot of fans who want you to have a full-time.
They're very disturbed.
But listen, go back to, I believe it was either last week's roundtable or the one before that, where I said, listen, I just don't. I mean, I think they have a great opportunity to catch up with Dusty because Michigan is a better cultural fit. And you might remember the comparison that I made. I said, he's a better cultural fit for Michigan. Will Wade is a better cultural fit for Louisville.
Absolutely.
Make it that very clear contrast. And that wound up being, that's why Vanderbilt is a factor. Like one of these seems like that's not like the others. Right. In the winning way. Like Vanderbilt doesn't have the basketball tradition of a Michigan or a Louisville, not even close. So why would they even be in the mix? Because culturally they're closer to Dusty than Louisville is, right? So that's why Vanderbilt is so up there. But you can't win at Vanderbilt, and I think ultimately that's kind of what pushed them down. And so now, if you're Michigan, if you're Ward, it has to be so the money isn't the reason to go to Louisville. And I think he came with the kind of offer, Craig, where money wasn't the reason for him to go to Louisville.
Right. And then Wojo asked him about his style. He said, yeah, we're going to shoot threes because they count more. And quote, we ain't walking the ball up the court. We're going to push the ball up the court, and we want our players to work off each other like jazz. And I thought, okay, that's kind of clever at the very least. And he also said we have to be flexible, and what we do depends on who we got.
Daniel said, what do we really know about Louisville and Vanderbilt's culture? We know that Rick Pitino had hot sex on a platter in a restaurant, kept his job.
Freaky
We
bitch.
know that Rick Pitino had a brothel running out of his door, kept the
Freaky
job. We know that he didn't get fired until they had him on wiretaps, talking about payments to Tuggs Bowen. And it wasn't even Rick. It was like I think it was one of his assistants. I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know about the brothel. Hell, I kind of was out of it with the hot sex on the platter. So I really don't remember being there. I don't think he said that, but that's my point. And then, of course, he wasn't really involved in the Tuggs Bowen thing either. So to me, that's the cultural difference. Like, you get down different at Louisville than you get down at Michigan and keep your job, right? So I don't think Gary Moeller got fired for having like a drunken outburst,
Right.
let alone all those things that we just talked about with Rick Pitino. So yeah, I think Michigan is a better cultural fit for Dusty than Louisville is.
Yeah, and it's what he said. So I guess we got to believe that's what he thinks at the very least. And let's see what else. They asked him about his staff, and that was interesting because it sounds like somebody's coming with him from FAU. And somebody outside of the program is coming in, and somebody inside of the program is staying. That's sort of what he said as I listened to his answer on that. Then to me, one of the all-time mind blowers. He said, and near the end of the press conference, we will have a product on the floor that people want to be a part of. We need to have a good team on the floor in year one.
Yeah.
And I'm in year one. And we need to be able to sell this team, and we need to be able to sell it from the beginning. Now, who says that?
Yeah,
Nobody says that. I mean, they don't even have any players as far as I know. I mean, is there a single person you can say is on the Michigan team next year? Probably Will Cheddar, because he has a year of eligibility for sure. After that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and so that's pretty bold. I loved it. I love that he said it. But what did you think about that?
Yeah, I was surprised.
Okay.
I fully expected for him to say, you use the normal phrases. It's a process. It's going to take time.
Yeah, right.
We'll
work hard.
We're going to work hard. We're going to try our best
Yeah.
to put the best team possible on the floor. But he was like, nah, basically he was saying, I don't believe in rebuilding year.
Right.
I believe we compete right now. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But it's possible in this day and age with the portal, right?
Right. It's possible.
You got some intriguing names in the portal. Connor Segian comes to mind right away.
Segian, killed us twice.
He did.
He's a great shooter, but something happened to him at Wisconsin. So I don't know what the deal is. And he can't play defense. I mean, but he can shoot the damn ball.
Who played defense for Michigan last year? I mean,
no one.
Right.
No
so he can't be much worse. I think just stepping on the court and getting in the stands, he'll be better. Right.
Yeah.
But Trey Townsend's you got some intriguing names.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In the portal that actually work. Think about it. Connor Segian is not an upperclassman. You could get him in the Michigan fan. Trey Townsend be a grad transfer. You can get him in, right? These are the kinds of guys that would work, and the kind of guys that you could possibly get and hit the ground running right away. To his point, but this is why the timing was so crucial as well. Like as tough as it was, I was rooting for Dusty. I had picked him to beat Northwestern, but it was better for him in this job at Michigan to get bounced so he can get right to work.
Yeah. The last thing he said near the end of the presser was equally as intriguing to me. Someone asked him about, well, are you going to bring the FAU guys? Now, FAU has 3 or 4 pretty nice players. They have one guy after watching the tape, they have one really, really good player. He's a Russian guy who would be a grad transfer, and his name is Vlad Golden. And he's 7, maybe a little taller than 7'1". is a technically real. He reminds me of Juwan. He's reminds me of Juwan as a player, but 2 or 3 inches taller, and that he's technically not quite perfect, but pretty damn close. And he can play hedge, he can hard hedge, he can blitz. On defense, he soft hedges beautifully, and he will block some shots, but he's not crazy chasing blocks. He has a really nice left hand. He's right-handed, but he has a really nice left hand. He has a left-handed hook shot. He passes the ball out of the post as soon as he's double teamed. I mean, he's a nice basketball player. Now, and then they have a couple other guys who are pretty good. Their big star is an interesting one. His name is Davis, John L. Davis. I think they call him Nelly. He plays power forward there at 6'4", which is sort of a problem. It's hard to evaluate him at a different position. But in any event, his answer was, I don't know. He said, I love FA. He said, I don't know. I love FAU.
Well, he can't, and he also said, well, I think he said something like no one's in the portal. Like he can't. I know we got to get to a break, Miz, but he can't say.
But
he can't get up there and talk about it.
Here's what I read. I read that this as, if they go in the portal and if they want to come here, yeah. But exactly. I'm not gonna pressure anybody or push anybody, because I love that program and it's done a lot for me. I like that. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. And so they're gonna have to they're gonna have to call me. I ain't calling them.
Right.
That's what I heard.
I said it's time to tamper legally. not time to tamper and get dinged in your press conference, right? So anyway, we got to get to a break. Okay. Like, what the hell, Sam and Craig? Give me a break. So we're getting to a break right now. Back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
I just didn't want any more Craig Ross story time.
No more Craig. Sorry,
wasn't sure. If we're gonna go down another story time, we're
I've got one in my back pocket on Rudolph Virchow if I ever need it. Because it's
of course he's gonna be looking at those at the FAU guys. I mean,
well, yeah,
any of them.
But I think he was telling us the truth. I think he was saying, yeah, I'm interested in the FAU guys, but I ain't gonna go down there and pressure them. They want to stay at FAU. They stay at FAU.
Well, they just by going outside and getting the Baylor dude, I think they made it a lot more likely that, from not just from a player perspective, but from a staff perspective as well, that you're going to see some representation on this Michigan. I think Dusty. I know Dusty knew coming in that wasn't going to be able to bring the entire staff if if one of his guys didn't get the FAU job. But I think the hope was that one of them will get the job to carry the program, his vision of the program on, make the players.
But they didn't, right?
They didn't. And so it creates a scenario where, from a player perspective, I think they're more likely to be available. Those who, I think they sort of assess their pro options and weigh that against Michigan. I think NIL is going to be a factor in that too. And then the staffing part is going to be more interesting, because I wonder how much of the FAU flavor he wants, even understanding that it can't be all of that. And I wonder how much he'll look to John Beilein in talking about that as well, because I think he'd be wise to tap John's shoulder, because John has a roster of assistants, any of whom I think would be good fits. I know Val was one of the ones that was consulted because he talked to Rob Pelinka, he talked to Terry Mills, he talked to Tim McCormick, he talked to John Beilein, he talked to Val Jordan. There were so many people that I talked to that he had talked to. Is like, man, he's really covering a lot of bases here. But given that guy was a part of the build up with Beilein and has Power 5 head coaching experience, you feel like he would be one. You got Dusty right here. I mean, you got Sadi right here,
Yeah.
who's one who's been around for the build with Beeline.
And Sadi, has been here really through thick and thin, to be honest.
Yeah.
He's been a very loyal guy to the program.
Yeah, you got
He
hey,
could
you
have
got
a
Billy
head coach.
Donlin, Clemson still.
Yeah.
I didn't have Clemson beating Baylor. You can't tell me Billy didn't have his and
Yeah.
Billy still checks for Michigan when Michigan won the national championship. Billy texted me like, "What's up? Just won the
Yeah.
national championship." So Billy still keeps an eye out for Michigan. Not to say I don't know how available he would be, but
Yeah.
guys there, Luke Yaklich
Yeah.
at UIC, or was it UIC, was around here in Michigan. There are a number of guys that I think if you tap Beeline on the shoulder, who I think you can maybe count as an advisor. Now, he said they didn't really know each other. He said he sat down with Beeline his first year at FAU, and Beeline sat next to him, and he was like,
Yeah.
Beeline's like, "You don't know me, but let me give you some advice." And he was like, "Well, I know of you though, coach. I know who you are," kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
And that same guy though was a he did him a solid in driving over and really answering a lot of the questions that he had. Questions that I think made the decision that he had basically already made in his mind kind of helped solidify, because he said, "I probably showed my hand too quick." He said, "Walking in that meeting, I was taking that Michigan job."
Yeah. That was a quote that I left out that I thought was great. He said, "Yeah, it wasn't in my own interest. It was clear I wanted this job." So, the interesting thing, and the one I left out was he was asked about Beeline, and I think his quote was, "He can have whatever job he wants." Isn't that what he said?
Yeah,
So
something along those lines. Whatever.
I
role
mean,
yeah.
he said, "Whatever role John Beeline wants, John Beeline gets." That's what he said, and I thought, okay, that's good. Now I don't know what Coach Beeline wants to do, if anything. I mean, he may be completely happy being a talking head on TV and being a occasional consultant to the Michigan Athletic Department and to Dusty May in particular. I mean, that's all fine, but I think the answer is the right answer. John Beeline, wants to come in here and be an analyst for the program. Yeah.
How much longer in this break, miss?
About 40 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, someone, I think it was Antoine, said
Uh-huh.
he asked me, he said, are they going to loosen academics? That's not in the purview of academics.
No.
Like academics, so that's not something that I think it might have been Jeff Goodman said he was made assurances about admissions and NIL. Ward can't do that.
Yeah, that's not his job description.
He can make promises about NIL support. He can't make any promises about him. That he has no say, no control over admissions. So I don't know where that came from. The admission standards are the admission standards.
Right. Exactly.
And Dusty kind of spoke to that. Like, that kind of you got to adapt to that.
Right. He said, he said, look, in fact, I have in my notes here a Marshall McLuhan quote: "To a fish, water doesn't exist." And that's right. He goes, "Hey, I'm living in this environment. I chose to live in this environment. And I understand from talking to Beeline and Ward that that's something we don't have control."
Stand by. Coming back on radio. And back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. We were talking in the break. Someone asked Antoine Johnson, he's in on all the shows. People were asking about Dropping Dimes. We didn't do it last night because Devin wasn't available. So we pushed it tonight. We're going to get into Dropping Dimes tonight. Daniel Horton has been watching FAU film. So he's going to give a full breakdown of his impressions of Dusty May's style of play. So be sure to look out for that. That'll be at 6 o'clock tonight on our YouTube channel. The next episode is Steady Dropping Dimes. So be sure to check that out. But he had asked a question about admissions in the break. And like, I understand why people ask that question. I don't know where national media got this notion, this idea that he was made promises about admissions. That didn't happen. It didn't happen. It's like, what are we talking about? I mean, so much stuff is just thrown out there, man. It's crazy. But that's not something that War Manual could do. So And Dusty kind of spoke to it, and you mentioned it in the break, Craig. Right? He was almost like, "Hey, this is I chose that. This is the job. You got to be able to navigate Michigan's admissions standards."
Yeah, and it was a sideways comment, but he said, "Look, I'm going to live with what our environment is, and we don't have control over that part of it." So
yeah, and he's gonna have to now. They're gonna have to tell him the JUCO ranks aren't really available to him because he did mention I'll get players from anywhere. I'll get them from high school. I'll get them from the portal.
right,
I'll get them from junior college.
international.
The international. I'll get them from junior college. I don't know about the junior college there, Dusty.
Michigan has had a couple of junior college players over the years
in history. Yep.
Yeah, I mean Ricky Green, back in the mid '70s, who was a great player at Michigan. Went to Vincennes Junior College, if I recall correctly. And then we had a guy named Chip Armour, who was a 7-foot guy who didn't play much, who played junior college in Florida. And then I think there might have been one other, but I think that's about it.
There was. You remember the
it was a guard,
guy, Brandon Hughes?
Yes, that's his name, Brandon Hughes. Yeah, he was and he played a bit. I think that's it. I think that's the list of Michigan JUCOs in the basketball program. So that's not going to be an easy one for him.
Yeah. Hey, we got to get some
hockey.
Just real quick. We only have a couple minutes left. Miz and I talked Michigan hockey yesterday, and Miz's contention was this is the hardest. This is the hardest. He's like, man, Michigan didn't get a great draw here. Right? That was his perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, it was inevitable, though. I mean, let's start at the top. We can talk about it some more. The NCAA does not care about hockey.
Nope.
They do not care about hockey. They don't care about hockey fans. They don't care about the complete ineptitude of the officiating, because Michigan lost 2 goals this weekend that were both terrible wrong calls on replay. This is a 5-3 Michigan win that they lost in overtime because they had 2 goals taken away in this game that were just crazed. So they don't care. And now they're playing at the home of Lindenwood, a new team. Congratulations to Lindenwood, trying to break into the hockey business. Their arena, 2,500 seats.
It's the practice facility for the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that the tickets are going for $900.
Wow.
In the market, because there aren't any seats there, and so it's absolutely, what they do is crazy. What if they had any concern about hockey, this weekend would be a best 2 out of 3. Michigan is a 3 seed, so too bad. They're going to have to play on the road at the 2 seed, and whichever one it is. North Dakota's good, but you're not making it to the final 16 in hockey and you're not, unless you're the 1 seed, you're not playing a meatball, you're playing a real team. And so I don't feel like the draw itself is awful in that sense. I think Michigan and North Dakota are very close in ability. Certainly from a data perspective, they look pretty identical. So I think it'll be a close game, and Michigan has a chance, and hopefully we get another shot at MSU, who's playing Western. But, these should be 2 out of 3s at least at home venues. They seem to do one of 2 things. They have these regionals at big arenas where no one shows up because they're in the middle of nowhere, or they put them at Lindenwood where there's no seats at all. They just really don't care.
Screw it. Let's play it at the Cube. Let's go to the Cube.
So let me tell you, let me give you some numbers here before we go. People have been saying on the YouTube stream, you've been 400 to 500 strong, but on all the channels, Craig, you've been well over 2,000 viewers the whole time. So, I mean, you kind of carried the day. The numbers didn't drop off with Solo Craig, man.
Everybody wants to watch a car crash.
Everybody wants to hear story time with Craig Ross, apparently.
Got up to around 2,500 live viewers, and that's not counting the people listening on the radio. So kudos to you, Craig. Appreciate you, my friend. We got to get out of here, though, folks. Enjoy the remainder of the tournament. I didn't find out how your bracket was doing. Hopefully, it's doing great, Craig.
I haven't made a bad pick yet.
Okay.
Got them all.
We'll get the rest of the crew back in next week. Be sure to check out Steady Dropping Dimes tonight at 6 o'clock, folks. On the YouTube channel. We'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports, Ann Arbor, a Cumulus station.